Good morning on the in the middle of the country. I'm Bill Gustin, captain with Miami-Dade Fire Rescue Department. I'm coming to you today for this hangout live from Clearwater Fire Department with my good friend Chief Richard Riley. And I'm going to have Chief Riley tell a little bit about himself. He brings a lot to the table. I thank you so much for participating and for your hospitality, Chief.
No
Just
problem.
tell us a little bit about
I
yourself.
was just glad we were able to get you out of the home today so you can see what the lake looks like. So, good afternoon. My name is Richard Riley. I'm the operations chief from Clearwater, Florida. Great town right outside Tampa, Florida, right on the Gulf Coast of Mexico, the Gulf of Mexico, sorry. But great place to come visit. And I'm the president of Traditions Training, which has a number of instructors with Dan Shaw and Nick Martin on here today. An ex-Fairfax firefighter, and just love the fire service, so be anxious to talk to everybody today about high-rise stuff.
Okay, we have another extra, special guest, I should say, today, and that is Nick Martin. Nick, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey, thank you guys very much for having me on today. My name is Nick Martin. I'm a battalion chief with the City of Columbia Fire Department in the capital city of South Carolina, and the chief in charge of the training bureau. Prior to that, I served as a lieutenant in the Washington, D.C. Fire Department, and also a longtime member of the Kentland Volunteer Fire Department, and very happy to be on here today with some great personalities and fire service leaders.
And I'm really happy to introduce our next guest, because when he is on the hangout, I am no longer the oldest guy here. So, Captain Dugan, sir, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone from the East Coast, from the snowy East Coast, but we're doing good. We are supposed to get another, I guess, polar vortex, and it looks like about 8 or 9 degrees this weekend, but not bad. It's February in New York, but my name is Mike Dugan. I'm a retired captain from the FDNY. I work with fire engineering and fire FDIC a lot, and I just wanted to, today, I would just ask everybody to keep, I got a call this morning that a young man by the name of Kyle, who's a firefighter up in New Hampshire, is landing in New York, landed at noon today, and is going to Sloan Kettering. And he can use all the prayers he can get. Please keep him in his family. He's a young firefighter. He's got a newborn baby, and he needs all the prayers he can get. So keep him and his family in your thoughts and prayers. Thank you.
Will do, Mike. Daryl Liggins from Oakland, California. A little bit about yourself, sir.
Hi, I'm Daryl Liggins. Obviously, you just said Oakland. I work on an engine company. I serve as a captain. This is my 23rd year in the fire service. Previous to Oakland, I worked as an engineer and paramedic at Redwood City Fire Department, which is a suburb of San Francisco. Yeah, I work Oakland Coliseum, bungalow houses. We're not a high-rise area that I'm in, but I have worked with the fire department's high-rise committee, part of changing our hose and nozzle system. And I work with the academy, fighters, and the use of the talking about today.
Okay, you're coming in just a little bit garbled, Daryl, but welcome aboard. Our bald-headed brother from Fairfax County, Dan, please.
Thanks, Bill. Dan Shaw, Battalion Chief in Fairfax, Virginia, also Vice President of Traditions Training, and as always, looking forward to another great conversation about high-rise firefighting with you guys.
Real good. And my brother from the Las Vegas area, Clark.
Good morning, brothers and sisters. Clark Lamping from the Clark County Fire Department in Las Vegas. Today it is a chilly 72 degrees and sunny in Las Vegas, so I feel for all you brothers on the East Coast. I'm on a temporary assignment to the training division. I have a 1-year assignment here. I'm going to be back at my Firehouse 11 on Las Vegas Boulevard. I'll be back there at the end of March. So happy to be here. I have quite an extensive history with high-rise firefighting on Las Vegas Boulevard, and I'd be happy to share it with anyone today.
Okay, great with the introductions. I want to thank our sponsor, Key Hose, That's keyfire.com. Take it from an old man that's got a few years in the fire service. Let me give you a bit of advice, if I could, about fire hose. Number one is don't go cheap with fire hose. You know, the old saying, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably isn't true. Somebody tries to sell you a hose at a bargain basement price and tells you it's just as good as a top of the line, something like Key. They're not telling you the truth. Secondly, don't test out your hose you're thinking about purchasing strictly in a parking lot. Today we're talking about high-rise operations. You have to have hose that's inherently kink resistant. Why? Because it's got to snake up and down stairs and around corners, narrow hallways, around doors that may be partially opened or closed, and you may not be working with optimum pressure. So you're going to need hose that will resist that kink. As much as I am not a big favor or a fan of the Cleveland or Metro coil load, I will say that that is a pretty good test to put your hose through to test its ability to resist kinks, especially at low pressure. Can't say enough things about Key. That's what I use on my company. It's a hearty endorsement. Before we begin our discussion today about hose selection and placement, I just want to clarify something that we talked about in 2 previous sessions. One thing that makes me very, very happy and very proud to participate in these Hangouts is the chance to network with folks. And I have been contacted by a man who has more experience in high-rise firefighting, in high-rise fire protection, and pre-fire planning for high-rise than I would ever hoped to have. And he called me out on a point that I had made about my assertion or my opinion that as a first arriving company that I would advocate getting up into the building rather than assume a lobby control position. And I do need to clarify that. Whether your company advocates, whether your department advocates or prefers a lobby control function, whether it's the first due company, second due, or fourth due, or first due truck, whatever it is, nobody goes upstairs without laying a foundation. And you don't build a foundation in the upper floor of a building. You build a foundation on the first floor. Before you go up into that building, you better have a pretty good idea of what you have because you've checked the annunciator panel. The other thing is scroll back in the alarm history to take a look and see what previous alarms have come in. That can help you track the progression of the fire. Let's say that you got a smoke detector elevator lobby on the 4th floor, and you scroll back in the alarm history and you see 2 minutes before that you've got a water flow in the garbage chute. Well, it's kind of giving you an idea where the fire is. So whether your department has that first due company assuming lobby control or not, that first due company has no business ascending into that building, be it with stairs or elevators, until they have gleaned specific information. They gain control of the elevators. Do they have a general idea of what floor the incident's on? Have you communicated with any building security, occupants, or management? So I appreciate the input. I love networking with my brothers and sisters out there, and if we can just kind of review our focus on lobby control, and if I can also say this too, I responded to a fire in a hospital, and it was a big deal. A little fire in an intensive care ward of a hospital is a big deal. Had we not had a strong lobby control from the get-go, things would have gone south really fast because we needed building engineer, we needed hospital administrator, we needed charge nurse. We had to identify another bank of elevators that we could use because the sprinklers rendered the elevators in the intensive care wing out of service in no time at all. So it's in an ideal world, we need a lobby control which is there quickly and starts this foundation for our operation. So having said that, can we just kind of go through our philosophies and what our department does on lobby control? Clark, please.
Okay, yeah, Captain Gustin, I completely agree with you that it is such an important assignment, lobby control, and one of the most important duties lobby control has is to account for the people coming into the building, what elevator they got in, what stairwell they're in, and did they arrive in staging. That is so important. There are so many places that you can get lost in a high-rise if you don't know what you're doing, and I can't stress how important the lobby control is. Now in Clark County, our high-rise plan dictates that the first 4 arriving companies go to the fire floor. First 4 companies go to the fire floor. It does not designate engine or truck companies. It's the first 4 companies to get a line in place. The first rescue unit goes to the fire control room, and they get a read on the alarm panel. And while these companies are ascending, they're going to report to these companies on where the location of the sprinkler activation is, the smoke detector activation is.
Now, tell me a little bit about what you're doing with your truck companies. I think
Okay, yes.
Yeah.
So what, in our high-rise plan, it's the 5th company to arrive is assigned lobby control. And it doesn't specify if it's a truck company or an engine company, but what the battalion chiefs are doing now, some of the battalion chiefs are making the first arriving truck company our lobby control, and the reason for that is on Clark County, the truck companies do all the elevator rescues. We have all the keys, we have all the picking pools, things like that. So the truck companies in Clark County are really, really familiar with elevator operations. So the battalion chiefs think, if I'm using elevators and I'm manipulating these elevators in phase 1, phase 2, I want the guys who regularly work with elevators to be running the elevators, which are the truck companies. So a lot of the battalion chiefs on my job now are making first arriving truck company lobby, and first 4 arriving engine companies are going to go get that first attack line in place.
Very, very good. And you know, I would be much more inclined to assume lobby control if I was at a building that I was not familiar with, because it's going to take too much time for me to become familiar with that building, and I might as well just stay right there. And if that is the case, I have a 4-person company, including the engineer. I'm going to have the engineer go to the fire pump room, make sure that the pump is running, and it is going to continue to run. That means it doesn't have a bad bearing. That means it's not burning up the packing. That means that its casing relief valve is open and it's not going to burn itself up. And then also we're going to check the churn pressure of that pump, that discharge pressure. Additionally, we will be checking the fire control room, as I said, and gaining control of the elevators. And then I will designate the 2 firefighters as designated elevator operators. So that pretty much takes care of our lobby control. And as I said, if I'm not familiar with the building, I would be much more inclined to do that first due than I would to go up into a building that I'm intimately familiar with in my first due area. So, Daryl, I thought we lost you. I thought you had to go to a call, but you're here again. Any thoughts, any opinions on lobby control?
Yeah, we have another company here, and they're going to take that run. Well, we try to establish lobby control with not the first company, but one of the first arriving companies. It's the 3rd due company that's assigned to take lobby control. I think it's extremely important, so we mainly know where people are going, and people that are arriving know what's going on. If people are arriving and going up other stairwells, let's say we've already established stairwell 1 as the attack stairwell, if we don't have lobby control, we could have people just ending up all over the building and just really create chaos. It's going to be hard enough to funnel people in the proper direction anyway. Also, controlling the elevators is huge. We have to establish the elevator controls early on. And so the main thing that our lobby control is going to do is let people know which stairwell is going to be the attack stairwell and can control the elevators.
Yeah, and at the very least, if you're not going to be lobby controlled as first due, there's certain things that should be absolutely critical that have to be done before you ascend via the stairs of the elevators. I mean, that's definitely recall the elevators, and you have to have a pretty good idea of where that alarm initiation is or where the report is, and of course we take that information with a grain of salt. And of course, the longer the trip, the higher the vertical descent, the more we will be inclined to make precautionary stops along the way.
I would say
Yes, sir.
My thing is, as far as lobby control is, keep any building engineer close. So if you have any questions about the building systems or location of anything, you have someone more familiar with the building than ourselves close by.
Daryl, I cannot agree more. I had a fire a few years ago where I physically had to reach and grab this guy and say, you are staying here with me, because he'd keep wandering off. And it's that important. Having said that, it's not a good idea to ride up in an elevator with a building engineer or security. I know that they think they're helpful, and I know sometimes they get their feelings hurt because we don't believe that it's just microwave popcorn on the 15th floor. Yes, I know you went up and checked it, but sir, we have strict regulations. We can't ride the elevator up into the building with civilians. Mike Dugan, any thoughts, any opinions?
Yeah, I think the first thing is, as you said, the knowledge of the buildings. In the city of New York, what we do is we have people in a high-rise, any high-rise. It's over 75 feet or over 6 stories in height. It's going to have, if it's an office building or a hotel, going to have a fire safety director or a building evacuation supervisor, a trained person who's certified by the city of New York to do this job. So we're going to check in with them. They're going to be responsible. We make those building employees responsible for testing the elevators, recalling the elevators, so they're already there when we get there and we get the elevator control. We're going to put our first 2 companies, depending on where the fire is. If it's less than 7 floors, they're going to walk. More than 7, they're going to get in the elevator. But we are going to put them to getting that first line in place as the reflex time. We have companies who are going to be assigned on any indication of a working fire that we're going to have a lobby command post company whose job is to support the chief. We're going to have field communications come in who's got a communications rig where they can monitor all the different handy-talkie channels. They can monitor everything. And these are people who are well-trained and versed in those skills, and they are going to be doing it. So knowing what's going on in the building, what support is already in that building, is vital to your department, how you're setting that up. But controlling the lobby is vital for us, and getting those elevators and getting control of building functions, ventilation systems. I mean, there were people who would turn purge fans on to purge floors because they would think that the smart thing to do would be get the smoke out of there, and they would be sucking the fire towards the firemen who are advancing up. We don't want that. So someone has to be in charge of those systems. If it's not a building personnel, then it's got to be somebody in the fire department before we allow our people to advance on that fire.
How about yourself, Nick? Any opinions, any thoughts?
Yeah, we actually had to just go through this because, believe it or not, actually about, 3 days ago, my department issued its first operating guideline on high-rise firefighting, even though we are a metropolitan city with quite a bit of those kinds of buildings. And we had to make a lot of decisions on who was going to do what, and we don't have exactly the resources that we wish we had, and we don't have exactly the reliability with our dispatch center that we wish we had. So one of the things that we had to contend with is, basically our plan is to use basically the first alarm worth of firefighting resources, which is only 3 engines, 2 ladders, a rescue, and 2 battalions, to go put the fire out. And then the other support systems, which lobby control would fall to later arriving companies. So for us, lobby control actually becomes the responsibility of the first arriving unit on a second alarm. And that might sound very delayed based on some of the other conversations here, but we've also, basically, long story short, if I thought that it would actually work out at the 911 center, we would have beefed up the initial response to a high-rise fire. But I don't, that probably wasn't going to work out. So what we've had to do is basically train our chiefs that when you have confirmation working fire in a high-rise structure, it should be very, very rapidly escalated to a second alarm fire, even if that is en route. and that would place that roll on the first engine on that second alarm. But that was kind of our logic, is that we thought that we needed to get a quick reaction force up there to identify and address the problem, and then build in the support behind it if the problem isn't resolved.
I think a lot of it has to do with resources too. In an ideal world, if we're rolling up with several companies, I would have no problem whatsoever in having the first arriving company be lobby control, because you got a bunch of companies right there with them or right behind them. So, Chief Riley, any strong opinions while I silence my cell phone like a knucklehead I left on?
Can you silence your flip phone, please?
Yes, I will.
Thank you very much. We send a beefed up assignment. We have about 300 high rises in our district. We send 4 engines, 2 trucks, 2 medic units, 2 chiefs, and a host of other equipment there. But ours is the 3rd engine every time, is the lobby control. We send the first 2 engines up along with the first arriving paramedic ambulances. They all go up together to get a hose line in service. So we have 8 to 10 people to get that one hose line in service. We think that's the best bet to quell the fire, and then that 3rd arriving company is setting up the lobby and directing the other companies where they need to go. But we have a standard operating procedure for that. It's more or less just another system of checks and balances. So.
I'm going to start with you. This is always a controversial subject.
Because we're going to be controversial. So.
Because we are controversial.
Yes.
This one will probably end up as a fist fight, but the only 2 guys you'll see fist fighting is Chief Riley and me, because otherwise you guys are separated. How about this one, ruffling feathers? Does your department, by the way, I came up with these questions, so I want it to be provocative. I want it to be thought-provoking. Does your department permit the use of hose smaller than 2.5 inch for standpipe operations, and under what conditions, if any, is it permitted? So I'll put you on the hot seat.
Well, first of all, we want to make sure that we know that we use key fire hose.
Okay.
As a high-rise hose.
Very good, very good.
And
all right.
we just did here in the last year switch from 2.5 inch hose to 2 inch hose, and that was because of an article that the old guy wrote here in fire engineering about 2 inch hose with 2.5 inch couplings. Dave McGrail came and taught us in '05, and we kind of switched over to that 2.5 inch mentality. You get a lot of pushback about the size of the hose or number of personnel, and it's just, I think it was a psychological thing also, just that big line in the high rise. So when we started looking at the 2 inch hose with the 2.5 inch couplings, we found out we could get anywhere between 210 GPM and 240 GPM out of that hose, and that was a no-brainer for us. We switched. We have 200 feet that goes up to the floor, 2 75-foot sections, and a 50-foot section. And the nozzle is on a 75-foot section. So it's worked out really good. We're very fortunate to have a high-rise available to us when we started to make this switch. So the first month we did the 2.5, timed them, getting the line in service, and then we timed them with the 2 inch, and it was phenomenal what the decrease was in the time of getting that 2 inch in service. So we seemed to like it, and we were willing to accept the lower gallonage, which is only about 10 to 20 gallons, just doing the maneuverability and then in the hose itself. So we were pretty happy with it.
Yeah, we've also had a real good experience with that. It's key, and I'm shamelessly giving it an endorsement. Key to 2 inch hose with 2.5 inch couplings. Now, it's my understanding that the reason for the 2.5 inch couplings is not as much for reducing of friction loss as it is to make it compatible with 2.5 inch hose, and that is an FDNY innovation, because I understand, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, Mike, but you broke from tradition, and which mandated the use of 2.5 inch hose and standpipe ops, and I understand that you have somewhat changed that with residential buildings. Is that correct?
Yeah, they're working on it. They're doing testing and water flow tests with the 2.5. We know the 1 3/4 doesn't give us the flow that we want. We used to try, there were a lot of companies when I was a fireman many years ago up in Harlem. We tried the 1 3/4 as the lead length for the mobility and the corners and everything else. And at the time, it was a project fire in Harlem, and they were using the ether to freebase the cocaine, and we had a fire, and we could not put it out. And the chief said, I'll let you guys try it. We'll see how it goes at a couple of fires. After that fire, we were chased down the hallway, and the chief said, there is no way you will ever use the 1 3/4 again as a lead length in my battalion. Now, companies have done it throughout the city and everything else because it is faster and easier to maneuver inside some of these project-type buildings and everything else. But now we are testing the 2-inch and with the 2.5-inch couplings because it allows you to fill the stretch in if there is a problem with the 2.5. If there's a problem with the standpipe, we had a lot of standpipe failures. I've had a couple of them happen in my career where because of people using the hallways as restrooms, the concrete and the acid in certain bodily fluids rot the pipes. And a couple of times we filled basements of buildings up with water. So what we found now is that we have to work on getting this. Also, the 2.5 coupling allows us to hook up to the standpipe. We don't need another adapter. So It makes it, I don't want to say idiot-proof, but it makes it idiot-proof.
Right. And what size nozzle are you using with that 2-inch hose? Right.
It depends on the certain companies. They're usually using the 15, 16, no, I'm sorry, the 1 1/8 tip on that.
Yeah. And my company's tried that, and we're getting 250 gallons a minute at 45 pounds nozzle pressure at a friction loss of about 25 per 100 feet with the 2-inch hose with the 2.5-inch coupling. Is that pretty much consistent with what you see?
What they're seeing, yes. And the 2.5, the 1 3/4. Even if it's only one length of 1 3/4, that we're getting 170, 165, 170. The 2.5 is about 270, but about 240 is what they're seeing now with the 2-inch, and it is a lot easier to move.
All right, I learned something from somebody years ago, early in my career, an officer that taught me the size of the fire dictates the size of the hose. The size of the hose dictates the amount of personnel necessary to maneuver that hose. The size of the crew does not dictate the size of the fire. In other words, I don't have enough people to use 2.5-inch hose, therefore we have to use 1 3/4 hose is a lame excuse. Fire is an unsympathetic chemical reaction and doesn't care how many people you have. You better get the people. Nick Martin, any feelings on this, on the use of 2.5-inch hose? What does your department do?
Actually, going along with what I just said, we're about ready to buy a whole new set of stuff. Currently, most of our engine companies are actually running an 1 3/4 setup, and we are not happy with that for the future. So we have just kind of completed specifying a new engine company hose load setup and everything. And I was actually just writing down some notes from the conversation, and that's gonna lean towards 2.5-inch hose at this time, just for the the various reasons that have been discussed on here. An interesting blast from the past. I did for a long time work for the Washington D.C. Fire Department in a number of the downtown companies and with all our high-rise and everything. And through my career there, and to this date, to my knowledge, we used exclusively 1.5-inch attack line, the whole setup, 200 feet long. For better or for worse, I know that's not really a best practice in many circles, but I thought I'd throw that out there for discussion. That's what we did use there.
Okay, I could give you an argument for 1 3/4, but you have to guarantee, and I don't know that we can guarantee anything in life other than death and taxes. Can you guarantee total compartmentation? In other words, it's going to have to be a residential building. Can you guarantee that it does not have some unusual type of fuel load? In other words, stolen car parts, ether, a determined arsonist. Can you guarantee adequate standpipe pressures, something around 125 psi, for instance? Can you guarantee that? Can you guarantee that there will be no debris? If you can guarantee those things and you have new sprinklered buildings, I could see where you can get away just fine with 1 3/4 and probably never have a problem. Can I say something else about sprinklers? It's not enough that the building is sprinklered. Are the sprinklers taking an effect? Are they having an effect? In other words, when you open up the stairwell door, are you met with a mist of misty, cloudy, steamy smoke? Okay, that's one thing. If you're not, then we could spend a whole Humpday hangout just talking about the failure of sprinklers.
Yeah, and I think, first off, I wasn't advocating that we go to 1.5 inches. I just thought that'd be a good discussion.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you.
And no to all of those guarantees you asked about. And some examples I can think of are the classic picture that's been floating around for years of one day when we had an isotoner glove make its way out of wherever it was living in the standpipe system and lodge itself in the tip of the first due nozzle, and obviously completely took that line out of service. Probably the only things that allow that to work successfully there, or have allowed it before, is number one, that due to the height restrictions in D.C. that relate to the National Monument and the other structures there, the highest building in D.C. can only be, I think, 13 stories tall. So it does limit the height of the building. And the way the operating guidelines are set up there, you'll end up with something on the order of 4 to 5 attack lines placed in service by just the first alarm companies. So, if anything there, you're achieving the gallonage based on multiple lines rather than one single line. But it still doesn't address the issue of the pump pressures, which in hindsight, I wonder how that was never really an issue.
Before I introduce or ask Daryl to weigh in, I want to remind everybody that we are being sponsored by Key Hose. That's keyfire.com. In my humble opinion, it is the best you can get, especially their Combat Ready, which is the top of the line. And don't go cheap on hose. Again, don't go cheap. The Key Combat Ready, I think, strikes the best balance of durability, kink resistant, thermal resistance, and maneuverability. So if you are thinking about replacing some of the hose on your department, contact keyfire.com, get some samples, and go out and try to kink that hose. And again, don't do it in a parking lot. Do it in a narrow stairway and a narrow hallway. Daryl Liggins from Oakland, what's your feelings on using hose smaller than 2.5 for standpipe operations, sir?
Well, first of all, can you hear me okay now? I had to switch internet.
Much better, my brother, much better.
Is there a little more bass in my voice now?
You sound like you sound like Barry White. You got a Barry White voice. Very good. Go ahead. Go ahead, Barry.
If I did like Barry White, I wouldn't be in the fire department.
Baby.
Well, when I started in this fire department, we were operating a lot like Nick is describing DC. 1.5 inches was our line, and there weren't too many failures with it. That being said, sometimes success could support bad habits. So just because you're doing something and you are having some success with it doesn't mean it's the best practice. We have to remain open-minded and try new tools and equipment. So I think it was about 2004 we went to 2.5. That's when I started instructing also with Chief McGrail, and I would honestly feel negligent not using it in knowing what I know with all the problems that can be encountered with standpipe systems, namely pressure issues and the plastics and synthetic materials in a lot of the commercial high-rise buildings. But I'll also say that we have idealism and we have reality. Ideally, if you look at the numbers of worst-case scenarios, and whenever we talk about some of the standpipe pressures, we're talking about worst-case scenarios like One Meridian Plaza, where you're getting something pre-93 pressures, under 65 pounds. I think we would all agree that we would want the lowest pressure system that we can get. A vast majority of the time, you're not going to have that type of situation. Firefighters are having success across this country daily. We hear about the failures. We don't always hear about the successes with things that are less than 2.5. I have not tried 2-inch. I haven't even introduced it to our department really to play with. And one key thing I think of success, whether you're using 2-inch, 1.75-inch, or 2.5, is I want our firefighters to use what they normally use on a day-to-day basis. Normally, we're using 1.75-inch with a 7/8 tip or a 150 at 50, or we're using 2.5 with a 1 1/8 tip. Those are all 50-foot lengths, and I don't want some different type of operation and foreign equipment for that low frequency event that happens. We don't have a lot of commercial high-rise fires in this city. Most of our high-rise fires are residential. We do allow 1.75 for residential high-rise fires, but we also have the choice of 2.5. So then this gets a little bit messy, because if the first company stretches 1.75, and let's say you have to extend the line and the next company came up with 2.5, well, what are we extending it with? So having too much of a mix of equipment can start making things messy, and I find it very clean for us to use 2.5 for all of our high-rise operations. If that was 2-inch, I would think that most people would be very successful with it. The biggest benefit that we've had, regardless of the size of the hose, is using the smoothbore nozzle. The smoothbore nozzle has lowered the tip pressure, increased the volume, and the debris capability tremendously. And even if someone were using 1.75, if they went to a smoothbore nozzle, they would find they would have a tremendous amount of water compared to a 100 psi combination nozzle. So yeah, I am open-minded. I think all the tools work. Some may be better choices than others. Obviously, as we get up into the larger sizes of hose, it gets more difficult to operate.
If you go to the NIST website, and they have some video. Am I coming in? Can you all hear me correctly?
Just fine.
Okay, because I'm getting somewhat of a feedback. If you go to the NIST website and you take a look, they have videos of 4 workstations. 4 workstations. That means the cubicles, the garbage can, and the desk and the chair. 4 workstations to replicate the conditions at the Cook County office building fire in Chicago several years ago. It is impressive. The amount, not just the BTU per pound, but the heat release rate is absolutely incredible. And I have to tell you, just those 4 workstations, if you had to go down a long hallway to reach it, it would challenge an 1.75 line. It would.
Well,
really...
I'll tell you this also. If we're talking about a commercial high-rise fire, a 2.5 may not be enough.
There you go, brother.
Properly flowing. Actually, I just got from a manufacturer today one of the small monitors. If you can bring something like that up and have a plan to bring something like that up on if it's a second alarm company or something, a lot of the manufacturers have these small monitors that flow 500 or 600 GPM. Remember, standpipes can supply a high GPM, but often at a low pressure, so they're not very challenged to flow something like 500 gallons a minute into a monitor. They're more challenged to flow a lower gallonage at a very high pressure. And to bring something like that up could be a very valuable tool. I think, Clark, you used that in Vegas. I don't know if it was yourself, but the Las Vegas Fire Department used that very successfully off of a standpipe.
And any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, so we are a department that uses 1.75 in our high rises, and we've always historically done that. And some of that's based upon a couple things. One, first and foremost, I think it is what Professor Vaughn from Columbia coined years ago the normalization of deviance, where essentially nothing bad ever happens, so why do we have to change it? And we become accustomed to that deviant behavior that we start to think that it's not deviant anymore. Most of our fires are in residential compartmented buildings, and with our staffing, we get 44 people there very quickly that we're able to get an inch 3/4 onto a fire in a mostly residential application pretty quickly. And nothing bad has ever really happened. Now, part of that is also we carry 2.5-inch hose line on our engine companies. So in Fairfax, you really only have two nozzles. You have the inch 3/4 nozzle, which is a 175-gallon at 50 psi breakaway tip to a 15/16 tip that flows 185, and that's universal across all our inch 3/4 hose line. Or you have the 2.5 with the stack tip, and usually all at the inch 1/8. So you really only have two nozzles you have to worry about, and they're both low pressure. Everything's 50 psi. So the way we kind of break it up is that we say, all right, if you have a residential fire in a high-rise, if it's a lower floor up to 3 floors, the company can stretch from the apparatus to it. They have to denote it. We still have to hit the standpipe, and the additional line should come off that riser. If it's in upper floors where you're going to have some reflex time, or it's a commercial application, then strong consideration should be given to using the 2.5. Additionally, every one of our engines also carries, Blitzfire is the brand, but one of those mercury nozzles.
You kind of froze up on us, Dan.
Policy, it's inch 3/4 most of the time. And I hope we never do, where it becomes wind-driven. Ricky and I were on a fire years ago that we were very lucky that the wind was blowing the opposite way, but that entire apartment was involved, and the fire went out with an inch 3/4. But a simple wind shift, and it could have dramatic impact. And that was a fire also that we had where I was the engine driver, and our riser was completely frozen. All the variables were there for things to go really bad. Just fate was on our side, and it worked out well. So for inch 3/4 for us, but we really want our company officers to be astute enough to recognize the fire conditions and say, hey, match the line, like you said, match the line to the fire conditions, and don't just assume because we've always used inch 3/4 that's going to work this time. There has to be those variables that go into it of, is it a wind-driven fire, what conditions you have, what's the reflex time, what's the occupancy type, and how long is it going to take for you to get up there and get a line on that fire, and how quickly can you secure a water supply. So there's a lot that goes into it. Me personally, I would like it if we were a 2.5-inch on fires, but we're inch 3/4 and 2.5.
Clark, your feelings on this. What does your department do?
Strictly 2.5-inch with an inch 1/8 smooth bore. That's high-rise complement right there. Now, a lot of companies, my company included, we do bring up 100 feet of inch 3/4 with a reducer and a fog nozzle. We typically use that for mop-up afterwards. I've got to be honest with you, the majority of the high-rise fires we have fought have not been in hotel rooms. The majority of our fires are in plenum spaces, in trash chutes, inside the shear wall, in basements, in kitchens, and things like that. So a lot of times we need a lot more maneuverability on the lower floors, kitchens and basements, for example. So we might hook up the 2.5 and then reduce it to the inch 3/4 so we can get inside of a kitchen and work around a kitchen or something like that. In maids, every floor we have a little service area where the maids usually keep their carts. For some reason in Las Vegas, these maid carts burn all of the time. So we're a little bit more versatile with our inch 3/4, but if we're stretching down a hallway off of a standpipe, it is strictly 2.5-inch hose.
Yes, when my department does, and my department primarily uses, my company uses 2-inch. My department uses inch 3/4, but we make sure that every company is capable and equipped to deploy the 2.5, and most important, to understand conditions where anything smaller than a 2.5-inch hose is going to be ineffective and dangerous. Just another quick word on the portable master stream device. Keep in mind that if you're operating, especially with a PRV or conventional outlets in an older building, they're only rated to flow 250 gallons a minute. We found this out through training. You may actually have to connect the line 2 floors below and Siamese it to a portable master stream device If there's anything good about the lack of compartmentation in a commercial high-rise, in other words, the walls only come up to the underside of the ceiling. If there's anything good about that, it's that you can take those portable master stream devices, blast right through the suspended ceiling, and get some real range on that water, and do that from several stairways. Maybe at least hold the fire to the point where it'll burn itself down to a point where you could initiate an interior attack. Maybe I had a friend of mine from Fort Lauderdale talk about a fire that they said they set up these portable master streams at the stairway. The fire was too hot and too big to enter. They set up the portable master streams, let them float, and hoped for the best. And eventually the master streams did control the fire, if not completely extinguish it. Chief Riley, I want to pose the next question to you, sir. You're again in the hot seat.
Is that because I'm sitting next to you, or because you have a question?
No, because the reason that you have a hot seat is that because you ate several beef and bean burritos right before for lunch, and that's what you're having us put up with. So that's just what you're going to have to do. Under what conditions, Chief Riley, if any, will your department permit a hose line to be stretched dry to the fire apartment or compartment before it's charged?
Well, I wanted to make sure I had that correct, so I busted out the SOP.
Okay, very good.
And we have it very well laid out in there, is that the only time you can stretch on the fire floor is if you have a clear hallway.
Okay.
If you have a clear hallway, you can stretch dry. Otherwise, everything's on the floor below or on the landing. When we switched to this 2-inch hose, I know you and Dave McGrail are against the Cleveland coil load thing, but our employees are absolutely in love with it.
And of course, we want to mention that you're using a hose that's inherently kink resistant. What was that brand name
Key
of hose?
Fire Hose.
Oh, okay, yeah, very good.
And it's combat ready, so that's even makes it even better. I don't know why Traditions Training's not getting a cut of that, but we'll try to figure that out. But I mean, so we allow that coil load on the landing itself, on the fire landing. And if you don't have room there, we'll allow you to use the first set of stairs that goes up to the floor above. We do not let anybody on the half landing or anything like that above the fire floor. But everything is assembled. If you have a dirty hallway, on the floor below, and advanced up that way. So.
My department as well. Any smoke in the hallway on the fire floor, hook up everything. Everything is hooked up and laid out on the floor below.
I figured if it's good enough for you, Bill.
Well, okay, it's good enough for me. All right, well, let's go to Nick. Same question. Again, I'll repeat. Under what conditions, if any, will your department permit a hose line to be stretched dry to the fire apartment or compartment before it's charged?
Pretty much the same thing. I mean, our rule with all of our hose line stretches is when you encounter conditions that require to put your mask on, you've encountered conditions that require you to put water in your line. So I would follow the same thing about the dirty hallway thing. One thing we do try and allow is sometimes there can be question in the buildings as to which standpipe outlet to hook up to, whether it's wall cabinets or multiple stairwells, and the wrong choice can screw everything up. So we do, to a limited degree, allow the ladder company to smartly work ahead of the engine company in determining the location of the fire area, and that might dictate or change the selected outlet that we use. But once we encounter conditions that we have to put our mask on, we need to put water in our line.
Nick, go ahead.
And Nick, do you allow them to stretch from a hose cabinet?
Well, not on the fire floor. No, not on the fire. If the building is equipped with wall cabinets, then they would need to stretch from the floor below, which probably would require extra line. Because obviously, if the hallway is clear now and we're stretching on a wall cabinet on the fire floor, as soon as we open that fire apartment door, then conditions are going to change, and we don't want the source of our water to be overrun by changing fire conditions or changing hallway conditions.
Now, in Clark County, do we allow that or no? The hose cabinets.
Clark County, it is captain's discretion. Very, very few captains, if any, would hook up to a wall cabinet. Very few. Majority are going to be in the stairwell, and again, the hose stretch is up to the captain. All right, if he encounters a dirty hallway, he can decide how he wants to lay out. If he wants to lay up to the landing above, if he wants to lay on the floor below, it's entirely up to the captain's discretion. We do have a battalion chief on our job that absolutely will not allow anybody to stretch, dry, hose, because he is worried of rapidly changing conditions in case a door fails or something like that. He is completely anti-stretching dry hose on the fire floor. So, you know, it's pretty much up to the captain. Our department allows the captain to make that, use his discretion.
What would be the conditions that would make somebody want to stretch from a cabinet? I mean, that's just one of those things I've just never allowed anybody to do, but it doesn't mean you can't have a good reason for it. I mean, I always wanted them to be able to crawl back to a safe environment rather than a cabinet, but
yeah,
you guys deal with a lot more high rises than I do. You in New York, so.
I agree completely because of that. You know, I want my line to end up in an area of refuge if I need to follow a line out. So, the Monte Carlo fire, for example, that rapid attack monitor that we used, they hooked that up to a hose cabinet because they did not have enough hose left. There were so many lines inside that building flowing. At one point we had 20 hotel rooms on fire at the same time on 6 different floors. So I asked the guys, why'd you hook up to the cabinet? And they said, we just didn't have enough hose. There was no hose left in the building. So we did what we could. We had to catch a little closer to the fire. So that was one example that we had hooked up to a cabinet, and they actually flowed one of those rapid attack monitors and extinguished the majority of the fire using that monitor being pumped through a hose cabinet.
I would like to say a couple of things. First off, Bill talked a little while ago about the PRVs, and we've got to remember the PRVs are supposed to be set by the height of the floors. And if the joke in New York City is, if you don't know who the company idiot is, go home and look in the mirror because it's probably you. But unfortunately, a lot of times, the person putting these on doesn't always look at where they are, and we have had fires where the wrong PRVs for lower floors have been at upper floors, reducing the flow even more, so we can't get the water through there. I have also been, when we were talking about hose sizes, I've also been a few times in my career, a couple of notable fires, been on the working end of 2 2.5s, going down a hallway, and it still wasn't enough water. So the conditions will dictate, as we said, what's going on. But if the conditions look like there's a problem, and as Nick said, depending on, and Dan was talking about where the smoke is, if you need your mask, I've been in fires where we've needed our mask 8 or 10 floors below the fire floor. So you're going to have a problem. We never allow anybody to hook up on a fire floor. That's come from hard-learned lessons where we have gotten firefighters in trouble. You always hook up on the floor below. And sometimes, because of the flow paths and everything else, even on the floor below, the guy hooking up is going to be taking a beating. So you have to be careful. And the other problem is, if the truck goes in, the door is opened or anything else, and all of a sudden now you have to reach up and open up that control valve, you could be getting burnt there because as the products are going up the stairs in the natural chimney. So all of this stuff is part of the size up of that grow, what's going on. But we have learned, because wind is now a huge factor in our high-rise firefighting operations. And we get a daily weather report at the start of every tour, the temperatures, the wind conditions, what we expect that day, because that is going to change the way we fight those fires.
You know, fellas, I don't know that anybody can really be considered an expert in high-rise firefighting in terms of experience, because none of us, I don't care who you are, Borough Commander of Midtown Manhattan, how many high-rise fires do you really go to? If there was ever a reason why we have to continue to be students of the fire service, it is high-rise buildings. Because we don't want to go to every high-rise building fire, because a lot of them turn out to be difficult and dangerous and deadly. We want to learn from the fires that we were lucky enough not to go to. pre-fire planning is absolute key. We've got to get out into these buildings. We've got to ask ourselves, well, what size hose line would we use here? What is the reliability of this standpipe system? You know, here's the other thing is, does the building have PRVs? Well, is your jurisdiction in compliance with NFPA 25, which is the standard for testing water-based suppression systems? Are those standpipe outlet PRVs flow tested every 5 years? I know in my jurisdiction they're not. I know it ain't happening. You can imagine the condition of a valve on a fire apparatus that was not exercised in 5 years. Any other thoughts? I'm going to say goodbye to everybody. And Chief Riley, again, thank you so much. This was a lively discussion. And again, I want to thank those of you that have contacted me and other members of the group to disagree, to agree, to opine in ways. We all learn from each other. God knows that I do. And I know that I am a better firefighter. And I don't mean to blow smoke up anybody, but I'm a better firefighter today because I'm on this panel with you guys, because what I learned from you fellas. We're all are going to be better firefighters the more we interact and network with our brother and sister firefighters from throughout the country.
And I would like to quote our good friend Tommy Brennan, who used to say, just because you and I disagree on something doesn't make you right and me wrong, or me right and you wrong. It just means we have different ways of accomplishing the same task.
Yeah, that is so true. God bless that guy.
Oh, my God.
God rest his soul.
Amen.
All right, just another shout out. You know that cancer is the scourge of the fire service. I have friends on my job right now that are going through that ordeal. It seems like it's not a matter of if, it's when the next person is going to get cancer. For those of us, maybe it's too late for old men like myself and Mike Dugan that have been doing the wrong thing for too long. But we are fairly senior guys, all of us here. We have to set an example. God knows I'm putting my mask on a lot more than I ever have. I'm washing my gear. I have to set an example. You can't do as you say and not how you do when it comes to cancer prevention, which means as senior guys, we have to set that example for our younger people. Hopefully, we now know enough about avoiding the contaminants that cause cancer that'll keep our young people from contracting it. As for us, some of us are ticking time bombs, and don't let that happen to you young fellas. Heed the warnings. So until next month, brothers and sisters, God bless you, keep you safe in this most noble profession. See ya.